Bi-Mart and Fred Meyer. I am Aaron Fentress on this sort of somber Wednesday mixed with different emotions because Joe Freeman, we all saw Damian Lillard put on an amazing performance, but the team lost a critical Game 5 at Denver to fall down 3-2 with Game 6 on Thursday. I still, Joe, do not really comprehend what I saw last night. It was so bonkers what Lillard did to try and carry this team to victory, but they fell short. Very briefly before we jump into our topics, give me your summation of what you thought while watching that game last night.
I mean, it's just ridiculous. And, you know, it's gotten to the point where I feel like Blazers fans aren't just expecting that kind of thing. They're waiting for that kind of thing to happen. And it's so surreal to think that a dude can do what he did, just boom, just like that. And it just kind of adds to the list of incredible feats he's had. You know, some of those shots, you're like, no, yep. And when he threw them, even the one off the glass, you expect them to go in. Just remarkable. And quite simply, you know, one of the best playoff performances, one of the best performances ever. I mean, statistically, without comparison, 12 for 17 from deep, 55 and 10 with one turnover in 52 minutes. I mean, that's just ridiculous. And then, of course, the heroics on top of everything, bringing the Blazers back from dead twice, the end of regulation, the end of overtime, and then almost a third time. Did he have 22 points at the end of regulation? So, like final 3.5 minutes or something crazy like that. It's just, I guess not the only beef, but the biggest takeaway is we should be exclusively focusing on how incredible and all time that performance was. But in the end, it's wasted. You know, it's spoiled because of the loss. It's an unjust kind of, you know, finish for something so remarkable, yet kind of fitting. I mean, this is a franchise that's been through this in the last, obviously, well, 2 decades or more, but in the Damian Lillard era where he does so much and takes his team and carries them on his back, and yet just comes up that short. And in the end, despite all that, the Blazers lost by 7. It's I don't know. I'm at a loss for words at some level to describe both what I saw and then just the outcome.
Yeah, definitely. Some people are comparing it to my man Michael Jordan's 63 against Boston in 1986 because he went off on the road, but they lost. It was multiple overtime game as well, but they lost. You know, the parallels between the two performances are obvious. But before we get into the bigger picture about this, let's continue to talk a little bit about Dame, because for me, what kind of trips me out about this a little bit is that he has such a mediocre, bad Game 4, right? And they didn't need him to play well. He's 1 for 10 for 10 points. So he only took 10 shots. Like, he just said, okay, I'm not shooting well. Everyone's got it going. I'll be the distributor. And then in this game, he just flipped the switch and just went nuts. And so it's just speaks to the randomness of the NBA, where your superstar can have a bad game, you win by a bunch, 20. Your superstar can have an amazing game and you still lose. So I wonder if him doing what he did in any way suppressed the rest of the team so that they couldn't rise to the occasion in the double overtimes, or if it was just absolutely needed, or they would have ended up just being routed. What do you think?
I would lean towards, I think there's a combo of the two. I think you do become a little, not complacent, but there's a tendency to stand around and marvel at what you're watching. You know, because and then expecting Dame to be Superman and do these, you know, heroic things. But also, he didn't get any help. How many guys missed wide open corner threes? And then obviously CJ, who we'll talk about later, just stepping out of bounds, you know, missing late chances. And Dame has a knack, and always has had a strong suit of sensing, okay, let me stand back, let me get my teammates involved, let me read this game and see how it's going, with, all right, it's go time. I need to step and go full throttle here to lift this team to a win. And so I do trust his judgment in those situations. I do see what you're saying, though, because if you're not taking a shot for 20 minutes or whatever, are you supposed to deliver in that moment? And but if Dame doesn't do what he did, then there's no chances for his teammates to fail as they did, I guess. So I don't know.
Exactly. All right, so let's dive in more into the help that Damian Lillard did not receive, the rest of the team, how they failed. Now, what
was that, an accidental clearing your throat, or was that designed for effect?
That was
just natural. Okay, well, it was well done. It worked out.
I appreciate that. Okay, I'm trying to call up these stats here. So the rest of the team, actually, for the most part, through 4 quarters, didn't play poorly at all. Powell was 5 of 11. Covington was 5 of 7, 3 of 5 on threes. McCollum was the one struggling, 7 of 17 for 18 points. But as a team,
Nurk and Melo.
I'm getting the Nurk. I'm talking about the stars. Nurk, that's okay. Nurk foul trouble, yes. Didn't shoot particularly well, 5 of 12, but he had a double-double, 13 and 11 in regulation. So as a group collectively, you look at that, you're like, that's not that bad. They were 29 of about 60, about 50% from the field. But in the fourth quarter, I've seen people say 1 of 19. I've seen people say 1 of 16. I keep getting 1 of 14. So I'm going to go with 1 of 14 collectively in the 2 overtimes combined. Now, you just said, we just talked about how if players are shooting for a while, then all of a sudden they're asked to take a shot. Is that difficult? These are professional athletes. Like during the course of the game, they're all going to go through stretches where they don't shoot the ball. So going through a few minute stretch shouldn't cause you to clank the shots that they were clanking, especially guys like Powell, guys like CJ, who were given opportunities to hit big shots and just failed to do so. And so for me, it's either, okay, was it just a bad stretch, or was there something psychological going on in that they froze up in the moment? For CJ, I don't buy that, because he's been here before. He basically lifted them to the 7-game series win over Denver with a ton of clutch shots. Powell has been to the NBA Finals and won a title, so I don't believe it was that. I just think they just collectively just collapsed in those 2 overtimes, not because of anything physiological, but because they just had a bad stretch, and it's unfortunate for Portland.
Yeah, and we could examine every guy on the roster and give our critique of how he basically failed the team, and they lost. But for my money, it comes down to CJ and Nurk, and really Nurkic even more than CJ. CJ rightfully took the heat. He hasn't played well this entire series. You look at his statistics and they're okay, but I think anybody who has eyes and can watch the series has seen that he has not played well. And he said as much last night. He failed Dame. He failed the team, and good on him for putting that on his shoulders. My biggest issue is with Nurkic, and the Blazers are 0-3 when he fouls out, and they're 2-0 when he actually plays. And we'll get into Nurkic a little more, but when you talk about Dame not getting help, that's 1A. You got Dame here. That's 1B and 1C with Nurkic and CJ. And so arguably Nurkic is the most important piece beyond Dame for this team because of what he does both ways. And CJ's the sidekick. And so if they're going to give what they gave, the Blazers aren't going to win, plain and simple. Yeah, Norm obviously didn't play. He didn't have what he did in game 4. I mean, obviously He was incredible in game 4. So that picked up for where Dame was absent there. I thought Covington was overall exceptional in this game. He played great on both ends. He had the 2 missed dunks late that cost him, but he hit big shots. He played great defense. He was solid. They didn't get anything from Melo really, but again, Nurkic. It's all Nurkic. I almost feel like we should let's just pivot to Nurkic.
It's a shift to Nurkic. Well, maybe we should. Go ahead.
You'll get no. Go ahead.
Okay, so before we shift to Nurkic, McCollum 7 of 22, 18 points, 2 of 8 on threes in a huge game. Clearly that hurts them. But yes, let's go ahead and segue to Nurkic, because Nurkic comes with more layers. It's not just about having a bad shooting night, which everyone has. We just talked about Lillard having a even worse shooting night in game 4 than McCollum had in this game. But Nurkic hurts you in different layers because, one, you need his defensive presence in general. We talked about it all season, how they were missing that. And 2, the other team's best player, the MVP candidate, plays the same position. And so, and you don't have another player on your roster even remotely in the same area code of a player that would be able to even disrupt Jokic. So when he goes out, it's not like, oh, we got a backup, put him in. No, you have a backup who's going to get lit up. And so much so in Cantor that you're playing Rondé Hollis-Jefferson, who didn't have an NBA job 2 months ago, and sometimes Carmelo's going in at center. So Nurkic has to be on the court, and they've been saying it the entire series. We're going to play him minute for minute with Jokic. That gives us the best chance to win, but he ends up playing 24 minutes. Jokic plays 46, which means Portland spent 22 minutes on the court with Jokic and no Nurkic, and that just kills them. So you say, okay, well, were all the calls fair? No, some of the calls were a little bogus. I thought that fifth foul for the screen on Rivers was a little ticky-tack, but still, you can't be a center wasting 3 fouls, which are also turnovers, offensive fouls are, at that end of the court when you're going to need to bank those on the other end. So, yes, that to me, and I think to you, biggest key of the game by far, him being in foul trouble and him fouling out.
Yeah, and a couple of the fourth and sixth fouls were just egregious. I mean, the sixth foul was just, I mean, what are you doing?
I think he was pissed because of the previous one. That's what I think.
Okay, cool.
Okay, and I'm not excusing it. I'm just saying that's what I think happened.
Yeah. Well, I get pissed too, but I can't go foul him. But like, I mean, yeah, I don't even know. Nurkic is so frustrating, and
he hammered Gordon. He hammered him.
And it, that play is just so emblematic of Jusuf Nurkic and the problem with Jusuf Nurkic. Good Nurkic, high level Nurkic is a difference maker and the difference for this team. I mean, his presence inside on offense, his defense, obviously, like you broke down. I mean, it's gotten to the point where the Blazers isolate his minutes on Jokic. He has to be on the court when he plays. His screen setting, besides the foul that we just discussed, is high level usually. He's just such a huge, important presence on both ends and in so many ways. But bad Nurkic, oh my gosh, it's everything from the complaining to the flailing to the just throwing up weak shots at the rim. It sets an emotional and physical tenor and tone for this team that when he's playing like that, it takes them down a notch clearly. And look, it's not earth-shattering to say if we get this Nurkic, this series is over not in the Blazers' favor. They have to have Nurkic on the court and Nurkic playing solid to high level minutes, as we saw during the regular season, as we've seen through the years. His presence is too important for them.
So the Blazers, he's fouled out 3 times in this series. No coincidence that the Blazers are 0-3 in those games. Mm-hmm. And Jokic has been held to 1 assist twice. And both of those games, the Blazers won. He had 9 assists last night. So it's not even just about preventing him from scoring. It's having someone who can disrupt him. So maybe he's not seeing the court as well or whatever causes him to maybe not distribute as well. And then the other players obviously have to play good defense against the other 4 players on the court. But yeah, he's the engine. Like Lillard, okay, Lillard's the engine. Nurkic is the wings. I don't know. I'm trying to make a bad airplane analogy here, but so Lillard can propel the team, but you're not going to stay in the air very long without Nurkic. Did I salvage that or not? Was that?
Yeah, it's good enough.
Okay.
And not only it's not just what we've just discussed, but it's the drop off from Nurkic to the next guy. And it's not that Cantor doesn't bring a lot, as we saw it in the regular season, but he can't guard Jokic. It's wholeheartedly a mismatch. And so then you start throwing Melo at him, and you start throwing Rocco at him, and they can't contain him more than a time or two in the block. And so the combination of all that is just. I mean, people obviously are critiquing Terry Stotts, and we don't need to get into all that right now. But it's like, who's he supposed to play when his guy is doing, playing like this? What's he supposed to do? And so, man, it almost boils down to: are we going to get good Nurkic or bad Nurkic?
In 24 minutes, he was a +1. Nurkic was. Rondé Hollis-Jefferson in 9 minutes was a -21. And Cantor in 14 minutes was a -8. I have mixed feelings about the plus-minus number. I think
we all do. We all,
but for this purpose, I think that's pretty glaring when those two are combined -29, and those are your backup go-tos. Now, some people have asked, throw Harry Giles out there. How bad could it be? Because at least he's athletic. right? He's got fouls to burn. Just throw him out there and see what he can do. I mean, would you try it at this point? I don't see what they
I
have
don't
to
know
lose.
that he has the bulk or beef to be able to hang with Jokic down low. He could certainly.
You can't hang, but I mean, just put him out there and just see what happens. And if it's bad, pull him out and put someone else in. But at least he gives you some youth and energy and excitement. And who knows, he might make a couple plays. But at this point, it's so bad behind Nurkic that I don't see if there's anything to lose. But who knows?
Yeah, and you go back to Game 4 where Nurkic was so good, and he had so much to say about how good he was, to Kendrick Perkins and all that sort of stuff, and that storyline, and then a game later, what do we see? And you're like, well, that's why people are critiquing you like that, Yusuf. Like, as someone who has seen a lot of Yusuf Nurkic basketball over the years and has seen him, evolve and become tougher and more consistent, this series notwithstanding, it's frustrating because you see what he can do and you see what his potential and what his potential means to this team. And then it's just so Jekyll and Hyde and so bipolar that it's maddening. It truly is. And so much is living and dying with the way he plays for this team. Now, on the conversely, he's tasked, his importance is because he's tasked with guarding Jokic, and a byproduct of him not being on the floor is that we're seeing the MVP when Nurkic, God, I keep messing up the year. And
I do it all the time too.
Yeah. It's not just that, with Nurkic out that Jokic is scoring and all that, but when Nurkic is gone, it's his playmaking. And he almost had a triple-double last night with the 9 assists, and the Nuggets had 33 as a team. I guess it kind of accentuates guard play and bench play, but especially guard play in this series.
Absolutely. When he is distributing the way he is, and it's not just the assists, it's all the other passes that set up assists, or maybe it's not an assist technically, but he helps someone else make a play. When he gets rolling like that, the entire team just it's beautiful to watch. And I go back to the first preseason games when Denver just thumped the Blazers twice, and Stotts talked about how well they move the ball and how their defense, or their offense flows. And if you don't play really, really sound defense, you're going to be in trouble. And that all starts with their point center, basically. So he had 9 assists. The entire team had 33. And a lot of that led to their guard play just destroying Portland. Now, you and I both said coming into the series, we both picked Portland in part because they were without Jamal Murray. And at this point, given what Rivers did in Game 3 in Portland, and given this game, if they had Jamal Murray, the series probably be over right now, right? Or maybe Jamal Murray just is irrelevant based on how these guys are playing, because their 4 guards combined to go 11 of 23 for 58 points. They put up 58 points, and that's being led by Monty Morris, who had 28 off the bench, I think it was, made 10 of 11 free throws. So that the guard play, is pretty much tit for tat for the Blazers guard play, even with Lillard going below. I mean, Lillard had 55, but in terms of impact on the game, all Lillard is doing, scoring 55, is making up for Powell and CJ, whereas Denver's spreading out their points among 4 guys, which is more difficult to defend. So the combination of the guards stepping up this entire series without Murray, and the depth of the Nuggets being far superior to what Portland's putting on the court is really, really hurting the Blazers.
Yeah, and we were going to talk a little bit about the Blazers' depth and inconsistent bench play. We might as well just weave that in.
Let's roll it into this one.
Yeah, let's just roll it right into here. And, contrast Game 5 with Game 4. Morris had 12 points on 5 of 12 shooting. Howard, 9 points, but 3 for 14. Campazzo had 12 points, a minus 20. He was 3 for 10. So that speaks to the discrepancy of what a 20-point win and a double overtime loss looks like. But you add in that depth, and Aaron Gordon, he was, I thought, sneaky. Really, he didn't have huge numbers, but 14 and 10 with 4 assists was solid. And he hit a couple threes at important times. And I think one was early, but if he's hitting outside shots, and Michael Porter Jr. is he went ham last night, had a double-double as well. If they're getting those complementary pieces, where we're talking about the Blazers aren't getting the production from their complementary pieces, if Denver is getting that from their complementary pieces, then this is what we're going to see. And going back to the Dame not getting help, well, Jokic got a lot of help last night, and that's kind of been the one game, if you get the help from those pieces and you don't the next. Again, game 4 to game 5, the point you talked about with Denver's guards, one night you do and one night you don't, and that's kind of the difference. And when Denver has played well, their depth has been the difference. When the Blazers have played well, it's been their depth that's been their complementary pieces that have been the difference. So I don't know. I'm not the smartest guy in the world, but that seems to be a pretty clear indicator of how this is going to unfold.
No, it's been huge. When the Blazers' depth is not producing, they're just in big trouble. There's only so much the starters can do, especially against a really good team like Denver. So, Carmelo's been up and down. Simons has been up and down. Those two were amazing in game 1, right? I mean, they carried them in the first quarter when they were behind and got them to have a lead in the first quarter of game 1. And I wrote about both of them separately. Other people wrote about both of them separately. And then for the rest of the series, they've been hit or miss. Carmelo's had, I think, one good game since. I don't think Simons has done much at all. So if you're not getting a lot of production from your bench, that puts more pressure on everyone in the starting 5, obviously. And it also limits, Stotts' options just not only in the rotation, but when guys are out there, what do you run for certain guys if they're unable to produce? So it's an unfortunate situation that's popping up for them because Cantor had a great regular season. He averaged a double-double. He had 30 rebounds just a couple months ago, and now he's a complete liability, which just shows the difference between regular season basketball and playoff basketball. So I don't know how they overcome that beyond this series if they survive it, but to me, that's been a huge red flag since game 2. All right, so let's move on now because life goes on. Lillard last night was asked about his big game and immediately said it doesn't matter. We lost. He was also asked, how do you get over this, emotional letdown? He was clearly frustrated about a lot of different things, especially, the foul calls, some of the foul calls on Nurkic. He knows how important Nurkic is. But he said, hey, I'm a grown man. I've lost games before. I obviously have to be able to turn the page. And they will turn the page. Obviously, they have to for game 6. I sort of look at game 6 as like almost a foregone conclusion that they're going to win based on how this series has gone. Like I can't even conceive them losing this game. I do not think they're going to play poorly at all. I think Denver will come in with that almost. It's weird in the NBA when you have two evenly matched teams where a team gets a big win like this to go up 3-2 and they have to go on the road. Their elevation of intensity is just gonna decline. It's almost 90% guaranteed based on history that's going to happen. Whereas Portland's going to rev up. So I think they're going to win game 6. What happens in game 7 is going to be a coin toss. Now, you have been here before with this team. We go back to 2019. They were down 3-2, came home and won game 6, if I remember correctly, and then went back and won game 7. So how do you feel this team will respond to this devastating loss and perform the rest of the series?
Well, it's interesting going back to that 2019 series. After the Blazers won that triple overtime thriller, I mentally was like, well, Denver's spent. This is their first foray into the playoffs at this level in a while. And, they're a younger team. And, man, they responded emphatically and impressively. And the way to do that, and the biggest issue, I think, for the Blazers today going into tomorrow is, first and foremost, you have to get over game 5. Like they have to – it was such an emotional crusher. And you talked about – Dame's sort of deflated mentality after that game. Again, everything he did ended up in a loss. So it's kind of a wasted, monumental performance, such a heartbreaker in general, and so draining, both emotionally and physically. Dame, CJ, Powell all played more than 50 minutes. So right. Physically tiring, emotionally tiring, to the highs and lows at the end of that game, to lose that game in that fashion, to know that statistically more than 80% of teams that lose game 5 in a 2-2 series go on to lose the series is the statistics are against you. Right. And so, that said, it is a team that has been here before. As we've talked about, there's playoff experience up and down the roster. I do expect them to respond impressively in game 6. But it's going to come down to all the stuff we've talked about. Dame needs help. We need CJ to show up, okay? We need him to be the guy that he has been in big moments. And, to CJ's credit, historically in the playoffs, I mean, he had his coming out party in a loss at Memphis back in the day where where the coach, proclaimed we have a CJ McCollum problem. And since then, he's been pretty solid in playoffs, if quietly and sometimes loudly, like in Game 7 against Denver in 2 years ago. So the Blazers need that. And obviously they need good Nurk. If they don't get good Nurk, then it's the series is over. And it's easy to get lost in what we saw in overtime and double overtime and just the end of regulation. It was such an incredible comeback and individual performance. But you flash back to those first 12 to 18, 20 minutes. That cost the Blazers in the end. Their start cost them. They came out, whatever you want to call it, lethargic.
They were down 14-1.
Right. And it wasn't just that they went 0 for 7 or whatever they did to start. It's their defense was bad. And it was bad for long stretch. It was like, 15 or more minutes to begin the game. They can't have that long of bad defensive stretches and expect to win. And so I think that there's still a lot of hope for this team if they can get past the emotional, toll that Game 5 took out of them. And if they get CJ back and if they get good Nurkic back.
I'm going to give them this. I think this even more than the benefit of the doubt. I really, truly believe this is going to happen. I think they're going to come out like rabid dogs on Thursday, defensively and offensively, blow the doors off of this Denver team. And, I'm just sitting here and say they might have a 20-point lead in the second quarter. Well, they were down 22 in the second quarter of this game and still came back and almost won it. So, of course, in the NBA, leads can disappear like that, which is pretty fascinating. But I think they're going to come out just at a different level, especially defensively. And like I said, I think Denver is going to be at that natural decline in intensity, and Portland's going to win Game 6, and we're going to go back to Denver. I do think they'll get over the emotional disappointment of this because there are enough guys on this team who've played in big games and dealt with stuff like this before, and Carmelo, and we mentioned Powell and CJ and Dame, obviously. So I think they're going to be okay in Game 6. The question is, can they bring it in Game 7 and not, like you said, have that stretch where, they were down 22. The game, you're down 22 on the road in the playoffs. You shouldn't win that game. I don't know what the stats are on that, but I don't think many teams have come back from being down that big in the second quarter of a playoff game on the road and won. So they can't afford to ever start a game like that again, or their season is going to be over. And one more point I want to make too is, to me, if they lose this series, what would magnify the disappointment even more is if the Suns beat the Lakers. They're up 3-2 now. Anthony Davis is hurt. If you could have come out of the first round and play the Suns as opposed to playing a healthy Laker team, I believe they could beat the Suns. So to me, there was a clear path to the West Finals that would compound the disappointment of losing this series in my book.
So you got them winning Game 6. Should they be concerned because your predictive skills have not been very reliable?
Okay, hold on.
Should they be concerned? Should they be worried?
Yes, they should. As a matter of fact, for the sake of Blazer Nation, I'm going to go ahead and say Denver is going to trounce the Blazers on Thursday. It's going to be a massacre at the Garden. Excuse me, it's not the Garden anymore. At Moda Center. There. Okay, I've just secured the win for the Blazers.
I would be surprised if they lost Game 6. I'm already wrong. I had the Blazers winning in 6, and so that's obviously not going to happen. But like I said, it's getting over that emotional toll to start with, and then I don't want to keep harping on Nurkic, but he's the single biggest. Of course. Yeah, it's like, as we've talked about, you
have to harp on it.
It's just so, it reminds me going back to before, maybe the year before he got hurt. It's just like, you see this guy with his teaming with so much potential, and he can be such a force, and just to see him disappear and talk about emotions. He's got that's one of the things holding him back. It's just his inability to curtail his emotions or to channel his emotions. And I know some people struggle with that in general, and there's only so much you can do, but
yeah, but let's go back to the Kendrick Perkins thing. Like, Kendrick Perkins' tweet calling Nurkic and Kanter the worst defensive centers in basketball was ridiculous. Kanter might be, but Nurkic clearly isn't. And I tweeted out how I think his defensive WAR on 538 is 7th best in the league. So, that's just a ridiculous assessment by Perkins. At the same time, I feel like Nurkic has to just be the bigger man and not he might say, I think that was unfair, but to call Perkins a mascot, he would be a mascot today. It's like Perkins has a championship ring, man. Like, say what you want about him, whether it was great or not great. He has a ring. And then for Nurkic to call out Perkins in retaliation and then come out and play the way he did in this game, it's just not a good look. Like, you can't call another man a would-be mascot and then you go out and play like you did in this game when you know it's critical to have you on the floor and foul out. So, like, sometimes players just have to push that noise out and just remain focused on the task at hand.
Yeah, who cares what Kendrick Perkins says? What he gets paid to say outlandish things, and he says outlandish things. So, but who cares? He has no bearing or no impact on what you do and how you perform. And if he does, then there's a larger issue at hand. You should not be motivated or unmotivated or whatever based upon what Kendrick Perkins says. You should be more concerned about what Damian Lillard says, and that CJ needs you, and that your team needs you to step up and perform at a consistent level. So again, maddening. And, you know, I can only imagine, well, I actually see it and hear from it. So I know exactly how Blazers fans are feeling, but it must just be so frustrating to know what this team can be with just a little thing like that, or just a critical, right there. And it's, the good news for Blazers fans is it's not over yet, but the bad news is, do you have confidence that we're going to get good Nurkic moving forward? And especially, are we going to get good Nurkic 2 games in a row? Because that's going to be the difference right there.
Right. 100% agree. All right. You got anything else? Any words of wisdom for the fans?
Go enjoy the beautiful sun, man.
I know.
You guys need to get over the emotional toll of that loss too. I ended up watching, my basketball games back because we're all vaccinated in the 2 weeks past and stuff, which has been both wonderful and awful because my body has never felt closer to old man than it feels right now. But Basketball Nick brought a projector and put it up on the screen last night. So while we were playing, the game was on, and then by the time our game was over, we were able to watch most of the fourth quarter and both of the overtimes. And at one point, he said, "We don't deserve him," talking about Dame. And I was like, "Dude, you guys lived through Odin, you lived through Jordan, you lived through B-Roy. Like, you deserve Dame, you first and foremost." But I think that just speaks to kind of the emotional toll this fan base has right now. So get out there, enjoy the sun, enjoy a day off, and then get back to it on Thursday.
Yeah, just real quickly on some of that. Some of the stuff people say, Dame should leave. Like, this franchise is horrible to him, and it's wasting him, and all this kind of stuff. It's like, geez, this is sports, man. Like, you're gonna have ups and downs. I think they've had a great 8-year run, given that they're a small market. Should Dame leave to chase a championship? We'll see. We'll see what happens in 3 or 4 years. But just the wave of emotion fans taking things like this is just astounding to me. And blaming, people were all over CJ, forgetting the fact that CJ was the reason why they beat Denver 2 years ago. He just was. Like, the best player that they had in that series, best player in Game 7, obviously. So you see people turning on him. So, yes, people need to relax, take a deep breath, enjoy the sun, have some fun, realize it's just a game. Everything's going to be okay, and look forward to Game 6.
Nobody wants to hear that, Aaron.
I know. No. It's easy for the objective guy to say that, right? Because had that been the Bulls and Zach LaVine scored 55, I'd be like, oh, my God. But,
yeah. You know what? Yeah, what are you saying out there about the Bulls and the Bears? I mean, I just see an incessant rambling nonsense out of you, and now you're telling Blazers fans to be calm?
It's not rambling.
What is going on?
Look, my nonsense is very coherent. Don't ever call it rambling. I take offense to that. It's very well thought out nonsense.
Is it?
It is. Trust me.
It's well thought out. There's no emotion at all in there.
It's my role to be the therapist in this. I was a psych minor, so it's my role to add some objectivity to this and help people move forward gracefully and with class.
See, I do things the appropriate way, which is when Florida State is losing a football game, I scream and curse at the television. I don't go on social media and blast the actual players or management or coaching. I think
what I'm
that's the
talking about.
appropriate way to handle it. Yeah,
100%. Exactly.
Yeah.
All right.
Now there may be some group text threads in which some private thoughts are shared about certain things, but never in a public forum.
Never publicly.
Right.
All right, cool. All right, that is it, for this episode of the Blazer Focus podcast, brought to you by Bi-Mart and Fred Meyer. I am Aaron Fentress, along with Joe Freeman, and we will see you again soon. Hopefully, and I'm objective, I'm unbiased, but I want to keep covering this team. It's been a fun season, so I hope they win the series so we can cover another series in second round and talk about that. We shall see.